The Korean president declares the world's impending doom after a disaster in Japan. An asteroid impact releases a virus that turns the populace into ravenous zombies. With the apocalypse unfolding, widespread panic erupts, leaving the public stunned and uncertain about where to seek refuge. But Ho is fully ready for this disaster. He owns a secure refuge in an alternate dimension and has been waiting for the chance to battle the undead. A few months earlier, Ho and his friends joined in Asura, a virtual reality survival game famed for its brutal difficulty. The game's difficulty was so steep that most players eventually gave up. Ho was left alone, as his party members betrayed him by never logging in again. Consequently, he kept playing and streaming the game alone, slaying monsters and rising to the top rank. After a while, he grew weary of that lifestyle. He removed his gaming gear and erased his public stream archives. As he advanced his culinary career, Ho became intrigued by a particular female customer. In a moment of playfulness, he uttered the command for a status window into reality and was shocked to see a blue interface materialize before his eyes. The screen showed his stats, exactly the same as in the game, except for one new skill, Private Portal. When he tested it, Ho opened a warp gate large enough for a human to pass through. He struggled to grasp the perilous implications of his discovery, realizing that if elements of the game were coming to life, the media that had sparked the apocalypse would be closing in. While searching the internet, he frantically discovered an article forecasting the asteroid's impact. Yet he still denied that the game's events were happening in real life, staring at the portal. He realized that the asteroid report and the gate's presence together confirmed something was terribly wrong. He paused, unsure whether to step through the portal. With no superpowers, no partner, no plan, or money, he weighed his options. Taking a risk, he eventually paused, then quickly grabbed a nearby ladle and slipped it in softly. The portal let him see what lay beyond. After taking a scoop of soil, he realized that the destination wasn't a labyrinth level from the game. Though that was a hopeful sign, he began to. I wonder if the portal just shifted him to another spot on Earth, since he had already packed supplies. During the journey, he finally mustered the courage to step through. Inside, Ho found a breathtaking landscape that was completely free of city structures. He immediately sensed the air was far colder than what he was used to. With no signal on his phone, he realized he had wandered into a remote area far from civilization. Knowing how isolated he could be, he pulled out a marker and etched the number 0 on a nearby tree. Marking the tree turns out to be a smart move, keeping him from losing his way. He starts his trek, but the strain soon begins to wear him down. The forest stretched out endlessly, its limits vanishing into mist. Just as he was about to wish for something exciting, a nearby creature locked its gaze on him. In an instant, it leapt forward with predatory speed, sending a shiver through the protagonist. Fortunately, the animal turned out to be a stunning valley deer rather than a ferocious monster. Importantly, the system instantly recognizes the unique creature, confirming that this location is indeed a realm beyond Earth. The deer glances at him for a moment before slipping away in quiet flight. Ho is puzzled by the abrupt departure, but he feels a surge of relief at its calmness. Still, he knows a violent encounter with a monkey or boar could turn his situation into a peril. Another important detail is that the valley deer never appeared in the Sora game. Once he arrives, he quickly realizes that this realm is driven by survival mechanics. With a blade at the ready, he advances, shielding himself from any sudden threat that might emerge. Until now, he clung to denial about the disaster that could wipe out humanity. Yet just as he was about to give up, he made a discovery, a glowing sun apple. He spots a mystical fruit and plucks it from the tree. After a quick pause to wonder whether it's safe to eat, he bites down and feels an instant change. The system notifies him that his stamina has been restored as a golden radiance blooms through his body, mirroring the effect of the sun apple juice from the game. With this final confirmation, he is completely convinced a terrible event is looming, and he also notices he's standing near goblin feces. Signaling he must exercise extreme caution, Xing-ho sighs anxiously, trying to boost his morale, yet, even after his doubts, he now accepts that the world is coming to an end. Having experienced the portal's effects, he exits the gate and returns to his original world. To brainstorm solutions, he's resolved to be ready for the looming apocalypse. His initial move is to go through all his gameplay footage and archive it on his personal hard drive. Conveniently, streaming every session lets him quickly retrieve this data, a resource he never expected to use in that way. He receives news about the asteroid impact, and the destruction of Japan is set to begin. In 32 days, the apocalypse begins, so he resolves to use that time to prepare. Recognizing that the game was marred by excessively harsh mechanics, the most absurd and problematic. Among its features was a condition called the Iron Death Disease. This phenomenon set off a wave of corrosion that destroyed every piece of metal on Earth. Buildings crumbled to dust, and, in a grim twist, it inadvertently aided the zombie swarm just hours after the event. With metal's disappearance from modern society, humanity was effectively sent back to the Stone Age. While the Iron Death Disease eventually subsided in the game, the main problem was that it persisted for a full year. However, the looming plague didn't bother him, because his newly acquired trait granted him a private portal that served as a secure escape. Songo holds a firm belief that the disease cannot cross the portal. After wrapping up his analysis, he pulls together all his savings to buy top-tier equipment. As he's about to face a real-life zombie survival scenario, he gathers all the essential gear and supplies. That night, as Songo scrolled through online forums, he felt let down by the few people misusing their awakened powers for crime and selfish indulgence. When morning comes, he buys extra supplies for his upcoming mission. On the way back, he also buys a hunting bow just in case. In the midst of these preparations, he realizes he might be overthinking the situation. He thinks he might be overreaching and acting too rashly. Still, he believes he can eventually recover his savings, even if his fears prove unfounded. Having finished his errands, he heads home and sets a closed sign on the shop. While lost in thought, he's suddenly interrupted by a voice. A woman who looks like Chaehyun from Solo Leveling asks, worried, about the shop's closure. He informs her it's only for a remodel, making her wonder if he's hit it big and earned a fortune. Songo tries to end the conversation by saying he has work to do, but she cuts him off abruptly to ask something. But she gets flustered, can't articulate her request, and turns to leave instead. Curious about what she wanted to ask and aware he could have pressed for an answer, Songo returns to his business. Inside, he vows to give serious focus to important matters, effectively ignoring the rest. Inside, he pledges to devote himself to what truly matters, deliberately setting aside distractions so he can zero in on his goals. His gaming playstyle is that of a playmaker or strategist, someone who enjoys using tactics to clear stages. He wasn't a particularly strong fighter. He depended largely on his intellect. It's simple. In Sora, boosting your stats is a complex process. Stats aren't earned just by leveling up. They come from hunting and exploring. Right now, Seong-ho is in the other realm sharpening his archery skills. With no prior training, he turns to YouTube tutorials, adopts the proper stance, and lines up the weapon. His experience shows in his calm demeanor as he finally releases the arrow. The arrow soars through the air and hits the target board. Seong-ho is genuinely amazed by his natural talent, briefly musing that he might be the chosen one. But the soreness in his hand snaps him back to reality, exposing that his physical strength is a major weakness. So he decides to focus on workouts to build endurance. Having finished his initial preparations, he moves on to the next phase of his plan. He pinpoints two immediate priorities: devising a solid strategy for hunting monsters and building a secure home base for storing supplies. Regrettably, he has no weapons or supplies at the moment, as his orders are still in transit. In the meantime, he spends his time hunting for golden apples and, by sheer luck, finds an abundance. After marking several locations, he turns his attention to mentally preparing for the looming apocalypse. His focus on early preparation echoes the strategy that kept him alive in Asura for so long. While scanning the area, Seong-ho spots a lone pile of goblin droppings. He'd been hunting for that clue based on a specific theory. Since goblins usually travel in packs, a single, isolated stash of waste points to a solitary goblin nearby. Reviewing the evidence, he concludes the creature is likely an outcast. Seong-ho sees this lone goblin as the perfect chance to gain experience, a true golden ticket, and decides to hunt it down. As night falls, he keeps searching, and the howling wolves signal that he's drawing close to the valley. Soon after, he spots the very goblin he's been hunting. Hiding behind a tree, Seong-ho sees that the creature looks just like its video game counterpart. Although goblins rank as the lowest tier of monsters, normally wielding only spears and poison darts, they're infamous for torturing and mutilating their victims. That brutal reputation is exactly why Seong-ho chose a long-range weapon, a bow, as his main tool. The goblin looks old and in rough condition. Noticing it's unarmed, Seong-ho quickly readjusts his bow. He knows keeping his composure is key to securing the kill. He releases the arrow, and it strikes the goblin's arm. Though he had aimed for the head, he's satisfied with the hit. Seizing the advantage, he readies a second shot. Yet the goblin reacts with startling quickness, hurling a stone that knocks the bow from Seong-ho's grip. It is then that he realizes he's facing a seasoned fighter. Both fighters braced for a close-quarters clash. Seong-ho seized his knife and swung a slash toward the goblin's flank. The seasoned monster slipped out of the way and struck back, hammering a brutal blow into Seong-ho's kneecap. Rising the stakes, Seong-ho tackled the creature, flipping it onto its back. With the advantage secured, he drove the blade deep into the goblin's chest, forcing a scream of agony. Then the light finally left its eyes. He pulls off his first kill, earning 2 points. Momentarily stunned, he struggles to believe he actually pulled it off and scans the surroundings. He spots guacamole and vegetable oil nearby, recalling that in the game blending them yields a healing ointment. Still, his immediate focus is to dig a grave quickly. Leaving the goblin corpse exposed is far too risky. The rest of the pack could find it and track him down. Abandoning it would also be unwise, since it might turn into a bone creeper. Seong-ho then spots a pair of red trouts nearby. His heart quickens as he realizes he's in grave danger. The moment he turns his gaze, a terrifying owl-like monster looms over him. The narrative briefly shifts back to Seong-ho's history as a player. In his live streams, he offered key insights into the game, replying to viewer donations that sought in-depth lore dives. Seong-ho had meticulously examined and detailed his encounters with goblins and kobolds. Though evading bone creepers was crucial, he mentioned that the forest contained 2 of the games. The most lethal beings, werewolves and owlbears, stand out. Owlbears, in particular, are fiercely territorial, serving an essential role in preserving the balance of the monster ecosystem. Reminiscing about his streaming days fills Seong-ho with warmth. He recalled a particular viewer, Bull Sungmin, who was always supportive. The other viewers were calm yet quirky, like someone who kept typing barking noises in the chat. Seong-ho is surprised that these pleasant memories are resurfacing now. He wonders if it is a. When confronted with a creature of pure horror that threatens to end his life, he refuses to give in. Given the circumstances, he reads these memories as a cue to concentrate. He makes the most of every second, trying to devise a plan while fully aware that owlbears are vicious predators capable of tearing everything in their path. The creature's lack of motion suggests it isn't particularly hungry right now. Yet the most unsettling fact is that they've encroached on the red trout's territory. Weighing all these variables, Seongho concludes there is likely only one way to escape this nightmare. Pivoting into a sprint, he steels himself, recalling that his mind remains that of the famed player Kimbap Joa, even if his body is now the weaker form of Kang Sungho. Gritting his teeth, Sungho faces the monster and declares his final vow to survive. The creature glares at him before unleashing a terrifying first strike. Although the owl bear excels as a nocturnal hunter, its main weakness is direct sunlight. After memorizing the creature's attack patterns, Sungho knows that only precise timing can save his life. He syncs his movements to the beast's strike, evading the slash flawlessly, and at the same time devises a way to generate a light source that will frighten it. Racing with lightning speed, he climbs the monster's massive arm, pulls out a flashlight, and blinds its eyes with a sudden burst of light at point-blank range. For a predator like the owlbear, this effect is so traumatic it leaves it completely blind. The scene changes to the protagonist lying in bed as his alarm blares. Though his body aches from last night's events, he knows he must get up. Sungho collapsed as soon as he got home, his last memory a frantic escape after blinding the monster. Coincidentally, he ran into the owlbear right after fending off the goblin. Reluctant to tackle more trouble, he tries to stand up for a quick bite. Instead, he drops to the floor with a thud, realizing his legs have given out from the overzealous cardio. Luckily, he still has the golden apples from the other realm. Sungho snatches one, takes a bite, and his stamina instantly revives, thanks to its magical power. Finally, feeling livelier than ever, he decides to head out and truly satisfy his hunger. After sprucing himself up, he ran into Mikkyong again. She had gone to another restaurant too. While eating, I happened to run into him, though Sungho wasn't looking for company. She sits with him because she enjoys having a dining companion. She quickly asks him if he has. She tried opening the status window, and her enthusiastic attitude made Sungho realize that this was the topic. She had wanted to talk about it earlier, but hesitated to bring it up. Mikkyong shows him a news report to prove the phenomenon is real, noting that some awakened players are already using their powers to steal money from others. Sungho is a bit taken aback by her boldness in posing such a direct question, so he lies, telling her that nothing came up for him. Sungho believes that keeping others in the dark about his status is the best move. His talent is more about strategy than raw combat, so it's a skill he keeps for himself rather than sharing. Right now, even his own safety isn't assured. He knows that if he reveals his hand to her, comparing the risk to that of the lady in the red dress, things could go terribly wrong. It's a carefully calculated move. He's still puzzled over why Mikkyong is so fascinated by the idea of awakening. Then she surprises him. Hesitant, she admits she had lied about something. Sungho assumes she means well, reassuring her she needn't explain. He offers a supportive word, reminding her there's still time before they head home after their conversation. At last, his delivery packages arrive. The supplies he ordered have come, easing his concerns about resources. He relocates most items to the rooftop, keeping only the essentials on the second floor. While preparing, he gathers the gear needed for the day's task, gas masks, suits, and other essential equipment, and plans to secure a suitable hideout for the mission. Setting up a base is vital, no wonder he's armed with an axe. As he steps through the portal, Sungho tracks his first clue. While searching for the elderly goblin, he accidentally stumbled upon a cave. He remembers the coordinates, heads straight to the spot, and finds it exactly where he expects. It's a perfect hideout for his plans, but he first has to confirm which monsters call the place home. Scanning the area, Sungho spots the faint, tiny footprints of kobolds. This discovery calls for celebration, as these creatures pose very little threat. Since he arrived equipped with a ready-made plan for low-level monsters, there's no reason for him to worry. Kobolds are night livers, so they're currently asleep. Consequently, he plans to suffocate them while they remain inside the cave. First, he collects firewood by cutting branches, he piles the collection at the entrance. Next, he prepares to douse the wood. Equipped with gasoline, Sung-ho expects to breeze through the mission, convinced that everything will go smoothly. The plan is to light the fire, but he's shocked by the noises coming from inside. The creatures. Rising from their slumber, they lock eyes on him, instantly seeing him as their next meal. Sung-ho greets the beasts softly, then grabs his axe and charges. A single, decisive swing tears both monsters in half, ending them instantly. Their sluggishness makes the kill even easier. With the back-to-back deaths, the system grants him a level up and 4 points. He then throws the lighter onto the firewood. Soon, smoke drifted into the cave. In Sora asterisk, low-level monsters have a glaring weakness. They're vulnerable to unfamiliar phenomena like this. He stands outside, a gas mask over his face. Instead of burning them outright, he opts for a method that's easier to clean up later. The sleeping kobolds are jolted awake, panicking as they rush out to flee. Sung-ho purposely weakens them and sowed confusion, planning to strike the moment they step into the open, taking advantage of their frail state to finish them off. He anticipated at least 5, yet only 4 emerged. This differs from their usual pack size, which normally has 7 members. He targets a kobold, instantly killing it, and notes that only 3 remain. The survivors rush toward him, trying to launch a counterattack with their limited gear. Yet he's fully prepared, axe in hand. With the force of a battering ram's swing, he cuts them down. When another kobold lunges, Sung-ho blinds it at point-blank range with a powerful defensive spray, and before it can react, he severs its head. With only 1 opponent left, the protagonist glares at the trembling leader. Claiming his dominance, he declares their end, promising to make good use of the abandoned hideout. The slaughter finally concludes, leaving. Sung-ho collapsed on the ground, exhausted. Even though the battle was easy, his lack of stamina was a major handicap. He noticed the system's stats matched the game's, including the debuff that shows his exhausted state. The rule that status points don't automatically increase upon leveling up also stayed the same. Nevertheless, the level upgrading is beneficial because it will eventually unlock the shop. Currently, his greatest advantage is he has a private space. Yet, even though he yearns for a clean environment, he is disappointed by the filth left by the kobolds. Once the hideout secured, the cleanup begins. He must clear out so much waste that the job quickly becomes exhausting. The cleanup feels especially tough, particularly right after a physical fight. Sung-ho curses the creatures for their unhygienic living conditions, yet he feels relieved amid the mess. Now that he has a new home base, he no longer worries about housing and uses the portal to return. He returns to his original world whenever he needs to dispose of the trash. While this method is beneficial, the cleaning still consumes a massive amount of time. He's most surprised to realize how items glide seamlessly across dimensions. He attaches a pipe to one end and turns it on. In contrast, he was amazed by its effectiveness. After hours of effort, the cave, finally gleaming with cleanliness, he's ready to tackle the next jobs, removing bloodstains and pouring concrete. To simplify storage, he examines the challenges of using mortar and sandwich panels for construction. A bright advantage of the cave is its abundance of luminous and ignition stones. Even though these are labeled beginner-tier items, their sheer volume makes them a real advantage. Once the construction finishes, Sung-ho feels justified in fully exploiting the location. The next day, he feels utterly drained. He's worked so hard every day that his whole body aches. When he looks at his arm, he's startled to see the cuts he's endured. The items he collected from the other realm rest on a nearby table. The method is simple. He blends guacam powder and vegetable oil in equal parts and stirs them together. The result is a mild ointment that aids basic healing. Thanks to his culinary background, the crafting feels almost effortless. Squeezing the ointment onto his arm feels like a tangible step forward. But Sung-ho worries that he'll have to repeat this production process many times in the future. He ponders boosting his stats through fundamental training, yet he fears the steep risk might end his life before the apocalypse even arrives. Though he sees the dark humor in that idea, Sung-ho rejects it and instead thinks about a more practical tool, like a gun. Suddenly, a realization hits him. There's definitely something he can use. He recalls the game's background lore, separate from the main story, and wonders whether it will hold up in an actual apocalypse. Organizing his thoughts, he hopes those backstory details will manifest in ways that could help him beyond anything he can imagine. With a fresh plan in hand, he heads to the rooftop to pick up the construction supplies he ordered. Opening the portal gate, he begins tossing the bags, one by one, into the other dimension. After all are sent, he gathers more items and descends to the first floor. He's about to shift a stack of packages when the same girl shows up again, and Sung-ho begins to wonder if she's getting too comfortable with him. He speaks to her straight on, which makes her a bit embarrassed. He tells her that he's just busy. During the remodel, she takes the explanation as truth, yet she's surprised to notice that. He's missed his regular trim, something he usually gets every 3 months, and Sung-ho notes it. He realizes a haircut would be practical for his upcoming explorations. Consequently, he stops his work and goes into her shop. At that instant, his long hair looks unkempt. He tells her to shave it all off, opting for a buzz cut. Surprised, she agrees to fulfill his request. As she works, she is intrigued by how much broader it becomes. Sung-ho's shoulders have become broader. He explains he's been training, while Mikyung discusses. She explains how the status windows are linked to survival, noting that awakeners are individuals who have played the game at least once. Throughout the conversation, Sung-ho feigns ignorance and he nods in agreement, yet asks curiously about where she got her information. Suddenly, a tattooed man strides into the shop, claiming he's there to gather fresh intel. Ironically, this man is actually someone Sung-ho once faced in a singing contest, and she's annoyed to learn he's the source of her information. The blonde-haired man tells her that a particular player has deleted his streams and is hoarding the content. The tension spikes when he vows to uncover that player's real-world location. Sung-ho feigns curiosity about the mysterious figure's identity. In-hand suddenly drops the name Kimbap Joa, Sung-ho's own username, complicating matters as the young man realizes he's truly being hunted. In-hand urges the woman to act boldly and join their team. Sung-ho finds the whole scene absurd, recalling that he only deleted the videos because he was disappointed with the game and had never considered personal gain. In contrast, the intruder is an arrogant pretender who boasts loudly. He even curses at Sung-ho for abandoning the community without publicly sharing his stream data, completely unaware that the very person he's hunting sits right across from him. Sung-ho questions whether this hostile reaction mirrors the sentiment of the whole community, prompting him to consider whether he should change course and start sharing information. Sung-ho rises to confront the man himself. In-hand yells at him for cutting the hair halfway through. In-hand tries to look tough, but Sung-ho's glare is deadly intense, ordering the short-statured man to leave at once or face more humiliation. Shaken, the troublemaker storms out while the stylist says goodbye, visibly relieved. Seeing her upset, Sung-ho asks for her phone number, convinced the man is a real fool who could threaten her safety. At home, Sung-ho feels sharp after his fresh cut. He dives into the forums, typing his username into the search bar. The results hit hard. Threads are littered with profanity and venom aimed at him. As he scrolls through the relentless barrage of hate, he spots In-hand's handle. Despite the site's verification, the guy is using a pseudonym. The whole profile is a torrent of negative comments about Sung-ho, a textbook example of a committed internet troll. Sung-ho turns off his computer, convinced that's the only fitting response. He's not mentally shaken and merely disappointed. A strange calm washes over him as he commands the portal. He opens it, and over the next 2 days he hones his hideout, concentrating on mining and construction. He wields a pickaxe, spreads water mixed mortar, and smooths it evenly every day. Once the job is finished, he steps outside to let the mortar cure. Staring up at the lone moon, he suddenly understood he must confront the injustice and cruelty. He has witnessed it all. He's not a hero chasing a grand purpose. His sole aim is simply to survive and emerge victorious. After making his decision, he turns around and is immediately startled. A bone creeper clanks its way toward him. Sung-ho is already rattled. He sees the creature as the perfect target to vent his frustration, unleashing an explosion. It follows, scorching everything with flames. When Sung-ho wakes up, he is covered in scratches. He was initially unsure of what had just happened, until the image of the bone creeper resurfaced in his memory. He's stunned by how he survived an explosion that close. Nevertheless, the answer became clear. At the moment he spotted the bone creeper. He knew it was about to go off and sprinted for safety, but the blast still caught up to him. The force knocked him unconscious, though it didn't kill him. Still, his escape attempt came at a cost. Sung-ho's right side is riddled with puncture wounds. With the last of his strength, he pulls up the status window for assistance. The system flags a drop in his stats due to his battered condition, yet because the creature was obliterated in the blast, he earns points for its defeat. A ringing headache begins to overwhelm his senses. With his last bit of strength, he orders the portal to open. Once he arrives in the next scene, his first concern is tending to his injuries. He must pull out the bone fragments lodged in his skin, a painfully arduous task. Luckily, the ointment works, stopping the hemorrhage. After wrapping more bandages and surveying his state, Sung-ho collapses into unconsciousness, exhausted beyond his limits for the day. Dawn wakes the next morning feeling as if he's on the brink of death. Worried about his recovery, he immediately opens the status screen to check his health. The system shows he's in stable condition, which eases his nerves. Rising, he wonders how the bone creeper managed to find him in the first place. He realizes the forest's vastness makes it likely for creatures to spring from hiding, a thought that alarms him and drives him to sharpen his perception stat to boost detection. Players mainly boost these stats by spending the stat points earned from hunting or exploration experience. You can also raise them with gear or weapons that provide stat bonuses. The problem is that Asura is an extremely tough game. Getting even basic stat boosting items forces you to face monsters far above your level, so you'll have to battle terrifying beasts just to snag a weapon. And skills unlock only after defeating foes. Powerful monsters only drop them under specific conditions. Yet not every skill works for every player, therefore. Sung-ho muses over a reliable way to acquire these stat-boosting items. He chooses to watch the game's backstory footage, diving into its lore. These background tales arrange it chronologically before the asteroid strikes Earth, which implies that visiting specific. Some areas could offer special items before the apocalypse actually starts. Currently, however, just a theory, but Sung-ho knows he'll eventually face stronger monsters, no matter what. He spends over the next few hours, she researches past data and pinpoints 3 critical locations where this background stories have unfolded. He highlights 3 possible lore events, the Russian ship and the hobgoblin, and one other scenario. Specifically, the Jiri Mountain Orc incident is the most immediate of the group. Based on the game footage, the orc was spotted on the 26th, so Sung-ho concludes he must leave on the 25th to find it early. With his next mission set, Sung-ho snatches his phone and notices a late-night call from Mikyung. The scene shifts to in the cafe where they meet, She asks about his condition and why he's chosen to wear a long. He opts for a long-sleeve shirt even in the summer heat. Sung-ho realizes he must conceal his wounds and notices that she's far more observant than he first thought. She suspects he's still rattled by the shop incident, but Sung-ho dismisses that. Feeling relieved, she tells him how terrified she was at that moment. Sung-ho then recalls a winter episode in which the same man used a tampered tow truck to stir trouble and attacked weaker people. He sums it up simply: the man is a terrible human. Mi-kyung is stunned by the news, having had no prior knowledge of the man, yet Sung-ho urges her to keep her distance. He immediately asks her why she'd invited him. She leans close and confesses she's actually an awakener. Sung-ho is stunned, wondering why she'd share such a sensitive secret with him. He playfully fumbles with jealousy, feeling left out of her good fortune. She admits guilt for having lied to him before, but he reassures her that it's all right. With that, they wrap up their meeting. He stands up to go. Sung-ho feels relieved that she gave him that information and admits that her words lifted his spirits. Before he departs, he drops a subtle hint, saying he's keen on survival life and intends to study the game thoroughly. Back at home, Sung-ho confesses that he's genuinely glad to have met good people like her. He wanders the shops, ultimately buying high-quality drones and renting a car for navigation. Tired, he heads straight to bed to recover for the next day. The next day dawns. At first light, he starts crafting the gear to hunt the orc. At his base, he crushes and refines ignition stones, handling them carefully because a wrong strike can ignite them. Next, he tackles luminous stones. Their fierce glow can blind him, yet he keeps mining them for their high value. After grinding both kinds of stones into a fine powder, he's ready for the next step. He blends sugar, gasoline, and organic solvents, then adds a hardening agent to solidify the ignition mixture. Thanks to the adaptable coordinates of his dimensional gate, he sets up his workspace effortlessly. Before he leaves, he loads all his luggage into the rental car, pleased with his acquisitions and the supplies he has brought. Having secured his supplies, Sung-ho drives toward Jerry Mountain with the aim of hunting orcs. He arrives in the Yongsan-ri campground's parking lot just before midnight, spending the remaining time to start image training and secure his equipment. When the clock strikes 12 a.m., he launches a comprehensive search. 2 hours later, the rain thickens, forming a mist that significantly reduces its visibility. Having already scouted the campground with no success, he begins to. He wonders exactly where the orcs emerge from the earth, speculating about the precursor phenomenon. Although what unfolds in the game may not translate into reality, his thoughts are suddenly shattered by a deafening. A roar echoes. Panic grips him as he turns toward the sound, spotting a dark, shadowy silhouette. A figure moves closer. Sung-ho sees it's an orc, but not a typical one, it's a red orc, which guarantees a skill drop when the foe is defeated. He steadies himself as he sets off a firecracker. He believes that if his plan unfolds as expected, he can certainly bring the creature down. His approach to the orc is uncomplicated. The first move is to leverage the orc's aggression to trigger its egg's growth. While the firecracker's flare distracts the beast, he strikes it with his axe. That is the window of opportunity. Aiming at the creature, he immediately opens the portal, pulls out a flashbang, and detonates it. The bright blast blinds the orc, and it will take about 20 seconds for its vision to recover, setting a tight race against time. Sung-ho then strikes the orc's weakened muscles, thanks to the status effect, to severely cut its mobility. The orc roars in fury, hurling its axe toward the hero in a desperate attempt to crush him. Sung-ho, however, leaps away just in time, evading the blow. He pulls out his knife and impales the orc's foot. The instant the blade slices through, the creature yells in pain and drops to its knees. With the orc's eye level matched to his own, he thrusts a flame-filled canister into the creature's maw. The moment it enters, it detonates. Sung-ho starts to revel in triumph, only to be knocked backward by a sudden punch from the orc. He scrambles to his feet, realizing he shouldn't have let his guard drop so early. He watches the orc advance, its upper body ablaze, though it seems unlikely to survive much longer. Sung-ho thinks he's about to be sliced to pieces by the orc and meet his end, until the system pops up, announcing he's now level 3, gives him 10 extra points, and unlocks a new skill called Will to Survive. He gets up, muttering that he can't handle this intensity, and asking where the drop item is. Then a light suddenly shines on his wrist. He checks the item and realizes it's a perception watch. A sigh of relief washes over him, glad he won't have to hunt for it in the pouring rain. As he moves toward the fallen orc, his thoughts race through the possibilities of what to do with the corpse, remembering the Jiri mountain orc. In the original timeline, the incident was under a strict embargo. He then wonders whether to release. Sharing this information is the right move, knowing that the situation could worsen if handled poorly. Remembering Mikkyong's earlier counsel, Sung-ho ponders the definition. Awakeners are defined as players who have experienced the game at least once. This realization brings a significant. In conclusion, thousands of awakened people exist, even if only a small number remain today. Members of the minority, like Oh and Han, have the power to dismantle the legal system for. Driven by personal gain, he has unleashed widespread chaos. Currently, his biggest problem is a dead orc. He knows he can't leave the corpse alone, otherwise it will mutate into a bone creeper. He would start harming people by the next day. A disturbing thought suddenly crossed his mind. He had not. He wondered about turning into a zombie himself. Even as an awakener, he remains vulnerable to a spore infection that could turn him into an undead, leaving him paralyzed with indecision. He wrestles with the best course of action. Opening the portal, he weighs the few possible survivors and decides the creature deserves proper disposal. Sung-ho starts digging a pit to bury the orc he has just killed, but fatigue hits quickly, and he wonders how he'll manage to haul the heavy carcass into the grave. Fortunately, his newly learned survival skill finally activates. Exhaustion triggers it, compelling him to finish the job immediately. Driven by this power, he works at maximum speed, knowing he has no choice but to complete the task. He hurls the orc into the grave, grateful for the skill's aid. Afterwards, he opens the portal and slips back into his moving car. The exertion takes a toll, so he needs a little recovery before resuming his usual routine. The next morning, he wakes up questioning whether the weather outside is real. Reviewing his plans, he notices that a defensive line should already be in place. He checks his phone, wondering if any trace of the red orc has truly vanished. Deciding it's not the right moment to start new tasks, he chooses instead to examine the items delivered early that day. Inside the box, he finds the weapons he needs, though he can only repurpose one as a makeshift Indian war club. Yet several items from the shipment are missing. He flips open a note that explains the items he ordered were labeled illegal, so they didn't clear customs. While he's busy checking the weapons, a delivery truck pulls up again. He shouts for the driver to drop the package at the front door. A knock follows, and he's puzzled. Why didn't the driver listen? He repeats the request before opening the gate, only to find that it's not a delivery person at all, but Mi-kyung. She's there because it's been a long time since they last saw each other, and she's brought a bag of food, offering him some rabaki to share. With only 24 days left before the apocalypse, Sung-ho can't believe Mi-kyung has actually come to his house. He becomes visibly nervous and can't stop blushing. As soon as she plates the meal, she encourages him to dig in. Before it cools, he follows her suggestion. After they finish eating, he asks. She goes straight to the point she wants to discuss, recalling his earlier mention of. She's delving into Sora and suggests a talk about some key game details. The subject didn't match what the protagonist had anticipated. He had briefly entertained the thought that she may have arrived with romantic intentions, Yet he steadies himself by thinking that discussing the looming apocalypse appears to be the most viable option right now, recognizing the need to have a reliable company during tough times. She quickly begins to take out the trash while he prepares by setting up his computer, then decides to tell her he's awakened. The notion that she'd be better off hearing it from him rather than discovering it elsewhere. Other methods. He starts by explaining the Iron Death Plague in detail, noting that roaming with a group larger than 6 is an easy target for zombies, he says, stressing that the stat is essential for survival, making it the most critical skill and the game's ultimate goal. To survive is all that matters. Just as he's about to explain further, she cuts in and brings up Owen Hawk's remarks about the backlash aimed at player Kimba Plover. She asks why he's withholding the information. Shung-ho has no ready answer and invites her to guess. She thinks everyone has a motive, and that particular circumstances probably explain the silence. He tells her he declined the man's offer to join his group, leaving her to wonder why he'd made that choice. He pulls out his phone and plays a recording of the group plotting to kidnap a girl just because she was hard to get. Hearing it again sparks his anger. He turns to Mikyung, warning her that when the apocalypse strikes, people's true colors will inevitably emerge. He cautions her against trusting anyone, yet she shocks him by proposing they should form a political party together. He tightens his fist, unable to offer an instant reply. The conflict arises because he wants to reach level 10 and unlock the shop before the tutorial starts. In survival mode, the respawning monster's strength scales with the player's level, so if she joined him, a grisly death would almost certainly follow. He laughs nervously, asking what she would do if he turned into a zombie. She reassures him she'll be fine, and then teleports herself onto his dining table. She displays her skill, glances away, and boasts that she'd only need to dodge if he ever tried to bite her. He marvels at her skill, yet warns her not to share it with just anyone. She replies that she trusts him and brightly suggests they could be a great team, provided they don't turn into zombies. Later, he stands beside the trees, pondering how easy it was to build fences. The process began by hammering support posts into the ground, then wrapping and securing barbed wire around each post. Next, he installs infrared sensors in several places, completing the task. He surveys his handiwork, patting himself on the back and convinced the effort deserves at least 1 point in dexterity. Seung-ho then heads back, finishes applying the mortar, and builds a defensive wall. He decides to move on to transporting the packages. After a while, he finishes moving the boxes, as he weighs his next move. A sudden chill sweeps over him, prompting a sneeze. He realizes that the environment and the other dimension will be cold, so he will eventually need to find shelter there, prompting him to devise the necessary countermeasures. After inspecting the cave entrance, the protagonist concludes a simple curtain won't suffice and decides to build a proper gate instead. With every step he takes, his mental to-do list grows. Later, he heads to a woodworking shop to set up production and purchase the items he needs. On the way back, he scouts the locations he plans to loot during the 5-hour window before the Iron Death Plague spreads. While compiling his list, he's intercepted by Tsungs and Seung. It's an old acquaintance he hasn't met in years, a divorced gym director and father of a young daughter. Seung-ho watches his expression, noting he looks unwell. Seung appears indifferent to his own condition, yet he notices Seung-ho's physique, remarking that he seems to be getting back in shape. The protagonist asks what's bothering him, and Seung replies that his distress must be obvious, given the world's end. Seung-ho is surprised to learn that the gym director is also aware of the situation, while Seung wonders whether Seung-ho really believes it. At first, Seung was skeptical until he saw his friend levitate, proving the superpower he'd earned. He lies, insisting he isn't awakened, and the gym director sighs sadly, admitting he too hasn't woken. At present, Tsung's friend is heading to a broadcast station to profit from his skill. Jim, the director, beckons Tsungho to sit beside him, and Tsungho realizes that the awakened's existence will soon become public knowledge. Tsung steers the conversation toward a bizarre recent event, the widow shootout. Tsungho can't believe what he's hearing as he takes in the morning news. Tsung urges him to check the news, but points out that posts are being deleted instantly, a sign that the media is now under tight control. Tsung goes over the follow-up reports, explaining how officials tried to mask the incident by blaming a deserter. As a result, the shootout site has been sealed off, with only the army and police permitted to enter. Suddenly, the protagonist stands. He offers an excuse to leave and begins to dash away. Back at home, he reflects on the fact that a shootout broke out right after the orc incident, and the government's reaction was unmistakable. It makes him suspect that they're already entangled in the situation. He pulls up a file on his. He launches a video on his computer, and to his surprise, he finds that many people had already nailed the exact timing. Within the precursor phenomenon, the shootout went on, even after he'd eliminated the orc. He places it simultaneously. While deep in thought, he wonders whether someone has leaked the information too. Early on, the government tried to take action, starting with the first precursor phenomenon. He wonders whether this individual stays out of the spotlight simply because they lack a striking trait. Although their true identity remains hazy, he's convinced someone is steering the government's moves from behind the scenes. Tsunghao ponders who this enigmatic figure could be. His research whittles the options down to 3 seasoned players. After careful consideration, he drops the game's creator from the list. With the game's mechanics now dictating reality, the creators are clearly the villains. He concludes that if those villains had government backing, they would never have let him kill the orc. He sketches the faces of the 3 main suspects, then wonders if the culprit might be the lone survivor. If this theory turns out right, he realizes he needn't hand the intel over to the authorities. Slouching into his chair, the protagonist wonders whether the top survivor is truly someone he knows. With a longing for his veteran friends, he chooses to trust them for the time being. He also recognizes that even if he revealed the information, it wouldn't halt the looming catastrophe, so he postpones intervention. 2 days later, a door is built and the pantry is stocked, completing the first shelter. He tries to fit 2 logistic trays by drilling into the wall, only to find the space is much tighter than he expected. The basement waterproofing he's been working on piece by piece is now finished. He steps back, vowing to sort out the remaining issues once the curing reaches its second phase. He faces a crucial task, mapping the area with his drone. Donning his VR headset, he launches it into the sky, first catching the shelter from a midpoint view before broadening his sweep. Through the feed he spots snow fields to the northwest and an ocean to the south. Noticing the sea is monster-free and teeming with prey, he decides to set up fishing traps. He scrutinizes the valley to analyze the ecosystem around his shelter. Suddenly, he recalls the spot where he buried the owlbear. But the body is gone. He suspects a large predator may have devoured it, yet he stops himself from reaching a quick conclusion since the area is filled with many tracks, mainly those of orcs, which only adds to the intrigue. He calculates the distance between the valley and the shelter lie about 1.5 kilometers apart, realizing that his base is in a moor. He was in a riskier position than he'd first imagined. He knew goblins were close by and unwilling to back down. To avoid risking the drone's loss, he brings the device back to the shelter. He manages to sketch a detailed maps out and catalogs the forest's wildlife. His next goal is to physically. He plans to inspect these areas himself, beginning by visiting the nearest swamp to see if farming proves viable. Suddenly, the infrared alarm blares. He steps outside, already knowing goblins are nearby. Their footprints on the ground confirm their presence. since the protagonist was all ready. Anticipating it, he sees the situation as a perfect opportunity and wonders whether his heightened awareness will pay off. This stems from his newly enhanced perception stat, allowing him to detect even the faintest sounds. It becomes undeniably clear to him. After a while, he spots a group of goblins while remaining undetected, he takes a perfect angle for an ambush. He grips spear and arrow, firing straight at a goblin's head. The target falls dead, but the remaining goblins instantly spot him and rush forward to retaliate. He moves swiftly, making the kills appear effortless. After eliminating 4, he turns his attention to the remaining 4. Though surrounded, he pulls an item from his pocket that instantly forces the goblins to collapse to their knees. Seizing their weakened state, the hero plunges his knife into their throats. He realizes his plan to exploit the goblins' exhaustion for a decisive victory has actually worked, a move he can scarcely believe succeeded. The countdown to the apocalypse now reads 21 days. As he digs into the soil, fatigue starts to set in, but his trait suddenly kicks in, restoring him to peak performance. He realizes that this skill isn't entirely useless after all. Shortly after, he completes burying the goblins' corpses. He then turns his attention to the loot he's gathered. First, he scoops up a guava fruit, an excellent cure for restoring strength. The haul also contains a generous amount of vegetable oil, leading him to suspect that a harvest site is nearby. Inspecting the goblin leader's pouch, he's surprised to find a living blue toad inside. The creature's color makes him wonder why they'd carry a live specimen rather than a dead one. Suddenly, the toad emits a rising vapor, and he realizes this is the source of the paralysis poison. He was captured by the goblins, but as soon as he saw the toad, he resolved to keep it, no matter the hardships. The creature was utterly adorable, and he also saw a practical use for its poison. By injecting small doses, he planned to build a resistance, while the paralysis toxin would make future hunts a lot easier. He named the toad Jadok and promised to feed it well. A notification from the system confirmed that the toad was now officially his property. He wondered whether this mechanic was a hidden twist woven into reality, a thought that made him overthink and overanalyze the situation. Afterward, he opened the dimensional gate and set out to travel. Back and forth, he eventually finishes reorganizing his supplies. Right after that, he starts scanning the nearby area and finds a spring that his drone had spotted earlier. He missed it. Inspecting the water, he determines it's ordinary and poses no significant danger. He is surprised to discover a secret spot close to his shelter, tucked just behind the spring. He stumbles upon a guava tree and vegetable oil buds, then picks the fruit and harvests a sizable portion of the oil buds, to keep him from losing his way back to this spot. He marks the trees along his path before turning back. When he returns to his apartment, he feeds his new pet, Jadok, and for the time being chooses to raise it on the second. He stayed on the floor of his apartment, convinced that leaving Jadok alone in the hideout would cause the creature's death weighed on him. While he tended to his pet, Sungho still had a host of other tasks to finish. The most time-consuming task was producing the ointment, which left us with an accidental surplus. Unsure how to handle the excess, he concludes he cannot give it to Mick Young. Because she too is an awakener, he decides to present it to Yang Nai M. While at Yang's place, the man is sipping a protein shake when Sungho hands him the ointment, prompting him to ask what it is. Sungho explains that he bought too much of it and that it's highly effective for healing wounds. Yang jokes about Sungho's supposed involvement in multi-level marketing, but the protagonist quickly denies it. Still, Yang thanks him for the medicine and for the information about Sora that Sungho had sent. In return, Sungho thanks him for the tip about the shooting incident and notices the gym is unusually quiet. Yang says that, after the broadcaster shared his knowledge, everyone headed off to brainstorm plans. The team has chosen to set up a base right here. Sungho cautions him that rallying a large crowd signals danger. Yet Yang will not leave his teammates, his fierce loyalty keeping him steadfast. When Yang asks what Sungho's plan is, the protagonist simply brushes it off. Suddenly, a scream echoes, one that Yang immediately recognizes. From the building's height, he notices Mi Kayung collapsed on the ground. Both men rush to her aid, asking what happened. She says she was attacked but couldn't see who did it. Yang rushes outside to check the building, ignoring Sungho's attempt to stop him. Sungho stays with Mi Kayung, who says that everything went dark before her eyes, leaving her unable to understand what was happening. That detail sends a chill down Sungho's spine as he finally sees what's unfolding. Certain factions have already begun to strike. He urges her to use her blink ability immediately whenever that situation arises, assures her a self-defense kit will be sent soon, and implores her to be extremely cautious from now on. Only 20 days until the apocalypse hits. Sungho thinks of a popular meme that says when 5 people gather, one is bound to be useless. Trolls are everywhere in the world, but they were especially common in Sura. In the game, specific patches were implemented to tackle interference. Though developers addressed the reports, they still struggled to bring those malicious players to justice. In Sura, trawlers would sneak into a team by posing as ordinary players, only to later draw the group in. A monster-laden zone that wiped out the whole crew, yet they still attracted beginners. They offered kindness only to kill them later and steal their belongings. These individuals did everything. It was possible to spark a dispute between parties. Their actions set the game in motion, which was already not. It became especially popular, yet collapsed within a single year. In the end, the user count fell to just 4. Primarily because Sungho's team made it their mission to track down the remaining trollers. Sungho quickly ponders why he's recalling this history before summarizing his current findings. After the Uido shootout, the Awakener communities have come together. They are no longer simply exchanging information, they're now actively scheming. He abruptly fell silent. When he learns that people are selling his videos, the protagonist digs deeper into the site and discovers that his former teammate, Dawa Jusum, was actually a troll. He's stunned to see a video thumbnail claiming that Kimbop Zhao carried Dawa Jusum. Sungho thinks the troll is baiting victims with edited footage. Unexpectedly, he snarkily claps for Dawa Jusum, noting that the skimmer is being praised for his clever thinking. Stretching his body, he vows to train harder to outmaneuver such deceitful individuals. Over the next 13 days, whenever time allows, the hero watches an online survival channel to sharpen his weapon handling and real combat skills. He also keeps an eye on monster attacks, including raids on hideouts, and notices that many existing tactics and weapons overlook the wire disease. After the 13-day training, Sungho finally turns to picking a primary weapon. He needs one that stays usable even if the wire disease strikes, and that can effectively handle both anti-personnel combat and monster elimination. Checking his tool bag, he finds an Indian war club, a wooden slingshot, ochre clay beads, and a hand-crafted stone axe, none of which quite satisfy his exacting standards. At first, the protagonist tests the slingshot. Though it offers great utility, the ochre clay beads prove troublesome because of their weak stopping power. Next, he chooses the Indian war club, noting that if the wire disease is unavoidable, this weapon takes away that worry. He points out that the most effective way to take down a zombie is to crush the spores inside its skull with a blunt tool. He remembers that at level 10, he wants to buy an ebony club, a blunt weapon, so he must sharpen his skill now. Nonetheless, he questions the Indian war club's effectiveness against human opponents and concludes its usefulness remains ambiguous, particularly when facing psychic awakenings that would be difficult to counter with that weapon. He knows that in survival mode, killing a human nets 50 points, but the murderer system was built to curb abuse by forcing registered killers into death matches with nearby players. He expects many will still eliminate other users for points, accepting the penalties. He crushes a practice dummy with the Indian War Club. He resolves to steer clear of hostility. Players until he has finished his item and skill farming. After the grueling session, the hero. He wipes his sweat, planning to tear down the store entirely, but stops abruptly when he hears. A wolf's howl breaks the quiet. He is startled, wondering if an injured animal has drifted close by. In the hideout, Xiango later discovers a wolf that is noticeably larger than usual. Big enough for someone to ride on. The system tags it as a gray wolf, yet a closer look reveals. He realizes it isn't breathing. He wonders whether it was a stray or had fled to his hideout after being attacked. Seeking more answers, the protagonist starts inspecting its injuries. Suddenly, a tiny wolf pup slaps him on the back. Xiango realizes the corpse is its mother, and the pup now stands defiantly between him and the body, protecting her. Torn, he can't force the pup apart. Deciding to lay the wolf to rest quickly, he grabs a shovel. As he starts digging, he thinks that if the wolf was a monster, its body might turn into a bone creeper. If not, it would merely attract other predators. Finally, the grave is completely excavated. Meanwhile, the young wolf lies beside its mother, a sight that takes Xiango back to his own childhood and to Mengchai, the dog he once raised. He lifts the little wolf, gently telling it that its mother will sleep in this spot. He tells the creature she can drop by any time, since he plans to build a doggy door at the hideout for easy access. Xiango then hands the wolf a piece of meat, promising it will never go hungry until it matures. In return, he asks for its help, particularly its keen sense of smell. When he seeks agreement, the little wolf chirps happily, nudges its head, and the protagonist names it Dingo. A system window pops up, notifying him that he has successfully communicated with the gray wolf and that Dingo is now his property. With this event concluded, 19 days until the apocalypse. Xiango is busy training Dingo, telling the wolf to repeat the actions he's just taught. When asked for a paw, Dingo offers it. The wolf runs, sits, lies down, and stays quiet on command, following every instruction perfectly. Finally, Xiango throws a large bone into the air, and Dingo jumps and catches it. The protagonist feels satisfied, noting the creature's rapid learning speed and attributing it to its otherworldly origins. Reflecting on its superior scent tracking ability, he mentally regards Dingo as a stroke of luck and a blessing. He kisses his adorable companion and starts talking, but his phone rings, cutting him off. Answering it, Xiango spots a message from Yang, encouraging him to search the web for levitation. Soon after, he stumbles upon an article about a figure called the First Superhuman. The person warns that zombies and monsters are about to appear, bringing disaster. The article has already climbed to the top spot. In the comments, the public shares. He remains skeptical, convinced that the broadcast channel staged the event for ratings. He notes that while many users are unaware of the truth, and the awakeners in the comment section are clearly alarmed. He finds it amusing, pointing out the irony that some folks get upset when they keep the information hidden, while others grow angry when their exclusive knowledge is exposed. The issue is widespread. The protagonist wonders how the government will respond, even as rallies unfold. About those shocks and superpowers, he snaps out of his thoughts and chooses to stay out of it. Himself in such matters, although he implies that the government will eventually take action once. As the second omen, the Hobgoblin event, unfolds, Xiango resolves to seize every moment. He tells Dingo that their exploration will begin that very day. Deep down, the protagonist knows that meticulous preparation is the only viable path, and Dingo is already excited to take on the task. After stepping into the portal world, Xiango ponders why he chose to explore interdimensional realms with the wolf. He lets Dingo sniff a small pouch and tells the dog to find it. The first goal of the drill is to ready themselves for the looming hobgoblin showdown, needing Dingo to imprint the goblin's scent perfectly. Soon Dingo barks, having located the bait concealed among the bushes, and the hero feels proud that the beast tracked it using only a faint trace. The second purpose of the outing is to see whether Dingo can stay calm in real combat and follow orders. When he signals, the wolf springs into action, swiftly locating a rabbit in the grass, which earns the protagonist's praise. The third motive for their journey is to see if hunting is possible in this other world. Xiango leans over Dingo to examine the kill, taking note of the rabbit's huge size and sharp claws. After that, the boy and his small wolf resume their exploration. Curious, he wonders how Dingo's growing mind will show up in the system stats, so he heads into the valley to see for himself. A pop-up window then flashes. Dingo's health is up by 1 point. Comparing it to his own, Kim Bafo's stat was 170. He marvels at how quickly Dingo is improving. Suddenly, Dingo coughs, and the hero hurries to fetch water, warning his companion not to wander into the woods alone. As Dingo sipped his drink, the boy spotted a large green pepper nearby and wondered if the wolf had eaten it. The system identified the plant as a bull pepper. Xiango was pleased to find such a treasure in the woods and praised Dingo, promising plenty of treats later. He then dug up and harvested the bull pepper. Afterward, they set out for their final hunt, sitting on rocks at the stream's edge. On this occasion, Dingo detected nothing unusual. Deep down, the boy realized that red trout aren't monsters, so they don't yield points or items, yet he knows they're essential for a young dingo. He values gaining experience. After catching the red trout, the protagonist decides to finish preparing for Phase 2 and head home. The next day, his entire restaurant is. All is demolished. The demolition company's manager asks the hero to get in touch within 3. Please notify us within days if any repair issues arise. Xiango sincerely thanks the manager for completing the work. At dawn, he draws a deep breath and feels a touch of sadness as he looks at the ruins. Seen, but he admits the destruction was essential. Once inside, Xiango muses that when the apocalypse strikes, the few who escape infection are bound to turn to looting shops. He acknowledges that he'd probably act similarly, recognizing he lacks the moral standing too. He grumbles as he starts to clean, and Young slips up behind him, surveying the empty space. Young notes that he, too, has pared his inventory down to the bare essentials. When the protagonist, he questions why Young is there, while Flick Xiango's forehead shows irritation. The hero had left the day before without saying a word. Young says he only stopped by to double-check. Xiango was still alive, and during the exchange, Dingo watched a young one suffer from a cold. A guarded gaze. Young asks whether Xiango has always owned a dog, but Xiango clarifies that his previous pet. He died long ago. He presents the animal as his new companion, prompting Young to remark on how. The wolf looks adorable. Xiango presses for the real reason behind the visit, but Young insists he merely came to check on him. The protagonist remains skeptical, prompting Young to disclose a secondary motive. He admits his concern was genuine, yet reveals he has identified the culprit behind Mickey Young's attack. At this point, only 17 days remain before the apocalypse begins. Seated together, Xiango learns about the group organized by Kim. Chael Jun, a man famed for always wearing a hat, is zeroing in on Mickey Young. Young adds that the tow truck driver Xiango dislikes also belongs to that group. Pointing toward the distant mountains, Young points out the spot at the base where redevelopment stalled, revealing the likely location of their hideout. The protagonist asks how Young uncovered the information, and Young replies that the clues simply fell into place. He adds that Han Jin Sion is the one who can levitate. He recently showed up on a variety show, giving Young a chance to interview him directly. Han Jin admitted he'd met Chael Jun's crew before, but found the members rather unpleasant. Consequently, he chose not to stay with them because of personality clashes. After the incident with Mickey Young, every female member began to leave the party. When asked why they left, the women simply said they had been offered positions by other awakening groups. Young turns to Seongo for his opinion, and the hero points out that, unlike Mickey Young, the others were probably tricked into joining. Young suddenly confesses that his own party has shrunk to just 4 members, himself among them. The revelation shocks the protagonist, who remembers that the group had only 20 members just a few days earlier. Although Young says nothing more, he confirms that their party now consists of only 2 awakeners. Seongo struggles to accept this, recalling the favors they had offered to members who eventually decided to leave, yet Young remains. He calmly explained to the protagonist that this is simply the nature of reality. Those individuals were merely focusing on their own survival. Moreover, Young voiced his concerns. He ponders whether to reach out to his ex-wife about their daughter, little Jae-eun. The protagonist keeps a neutral look, aware of how their circumstances differ. Still, he wants to confirm that his reasoning holds, so he decides to ask Hyung a question that it's been on his mind. The protagonist asks how Hyung would respond if an apocalypse occurred. He finally arrived, and people began to threaten him. Before he could finish the imagined scenario, Young interrupts, firmly insisting he would not hesitate to kill them. He explains that, while he follows a principle of not harming others, a lawless disaster would leave him with nothing. Alternatively, he believes that in such dire times, there is no room for evil to persist. Young then, with curiosity, asks why Seongo would raise such a topic, noting it seems out of character for him. When a cry for help rings out, the protagonist dodges, offering a genuine answer. A voice crackles from the hero's cell phone. Young wonders if it's a lost child's call, but Seongo immediately checks the map and asks Hyung to look after Dingo for a bit. Elsewhere, Mikyung is surrounded by hostile strangers after apparently blasting a distress signal. The tow truck officer snidely asks her why she's causing a fuss and orders her to come down. Mikyung stands on the rooftop's edge, shouting that she has already turned down their offers, yet they keep chasing her. She demands to know their motives. The enforcer urges her to rethink it, but Kim Cha-ol and Ma-jung step forward, insisting they will handle the situation on their own terms. They explain that in this bleak redevelopment zone, no one will send a rescuer. Kim Cha-ol tells her to conserve her energy, reminding everyone of their unique strengths before the countdown begins. Meanwhile, the protagonist hides in a nearby alley, readying his weapons. At the 2 count, he lines up his slingshot on Kim Cha-ol, and by 3 the target is struck. The whole group is thrown into confusion, scrambling to pinpoint where the attack came from. Suddenly, the protagonist bursts out in a helmet, stepping forward to attack while internally debating whether to reveal his identity. Wheeling in the Indian War Club, Seung-ho delivers a powerful strike before immediately aiming at another gang member. The second foe releases a dark energy, making the hero suspect a sight obscuring power, yet Seung-ho still lands a hit. Gasping, the hero hears Mikyung shouting a warning. He pivots, only to see Kim Cha-ol rushing at him with a bat. The strike lands, cracking his helmet. Seung-ho is stunned by the sheer force of the blow. While Kim Cha-ol spots his attacker, Seung-ho is engrossed in his analysis, noting that even at this early stage Kim Cha-ol already wields an exceptionally powerful offensive trait. Kim Cha-ol vows to cripple the protagonist, and his subordinates rally behind him, resolved to give their all. They're not awakeners. Instead, the hero charges, channels electricity, and mocks him during the battle. The approach stalls. Seung-ho hesitates, unsure how to respond to such a display of skill, and briefly considers using the dimensional gate. Yet just as an In prepares to land a blow, Dingo bursts onto the scene and bites his arm. Yang steps out of a nearby alley, questioning whether such violence belongs in broad daylight. He advises the gang to leave to avoid legal trouble, noting that he's already contacting the police. The group opts to retreat for now. Yang points out that despite their arrogance, they still look weak. Mai Kaiyung drops from the roof, immediately seizing the hero's head to check for injuries and pointing out the dent in his helmet. Yang steps forward and offers to carry the boy on his back, showing their concern. When Mai Kaiyang urges a hospital visit, the hero brushes it off, claiming he's fine. He then asks Yang if Mai Kaiyang can join their group. Yang says it's okay as long as she agrees, and Mai Kaiyang gladly accepts. The hero departs, saying he has other matters to attend to, leaving Yang and Mai Kaiyang bewildered by his strange behavior. Back home, he studies his emotions and charts the next phase of his plans. He knows his sudden exit was inevitable. Seeing Yang and Mai Kaiyang together tempted him to share the secret of his powers, but the decision had already been made. To fully leverage the dimensional gate, he resolves to level up quickly, concentrating on skill mastery and resource farming. After battling the mountain gang, the idea of crushing enemies with superior gear hits him even harder. He sees that sticking to his original plan would leave him 3 or more levels behind, making the nearby monsters stronger and complicating teamwork with his 2 companions. So he keeps working until he finally installs a wood-burning stove in his hideout, knowing it will give him a good night's sleep. Dingo also enjoys the warmth and sleeps soundly beside it. Now the protagonist waits for a few more items to arrive, almost finishing his initial hideout, fueled by determination. He vows to stay up all night to keep working. The countdown now reads 16 days to go. Before the apocalypse starts, a news broadcast offers an update on the events that have already been witnessed. Asteroid. According to the report, the HSA has announced that the asteroid Yunjambi has arrived at the halfway point of the solar system. Meanwhile, the HSA is vigilantly monitoring its trajectory. Jupiter's gravity tore the meteorite apart. Thomas Chandler, the head of the Meteorite Observation Department, reassures the public that the resulting fragments, the objects dubbed Yunjambi Alpha and Beta, pose no danger of approaching Earth. Nevertheless, Sung-ho recalls the exact timeline. On D5, just 5 days before the apocalypse, Yunjambi Beta made the first impact, striking the ocean near a Russian vessel, causing a tsunami that pulled the ship ashore at Gamcheon port, an incident that marked the beginning of Zombies Head to Korea. The broadcast shifts its focus to the shooting incident at Waido. Reports say President Jang Won-tuk has been confined to his home for a week, prompting opposition leaders to issue a joint statement calling for a hearing. The public is increasingly speculating that these political moves are tied to rumors about awakeners and the looming catastrophe. Hearing this, the protagonist privately recognizes that the apocalypse is truly at hand. He sees the media's newfound interest in these topics as a welcome shift, believing that the heightened scrutiny will make it harder for awakeners to carry out criminal acts. He pulls out his laptop to see how the community reacts. While scrolling through the comments, he notices that users are voicing strong opinions about the situation. Coincidentally, he spots a comment from my dream, making him wonder whether that person has stayed active all this time. Dream was a player known for his kindness to beginners, and Sung-ho's group had played with him on several occasions. The player's aim was to build a bunker. If the hero hadn't had a private portal, he might have been tempted to join that effort. He chooses not to sign any agreements unless his veteran friends also decide to join my dream, though he bookmarks the comment for future reference. He shuts his laptop and sets his sights on building a second shelter. The next day, Sung-ho stands at his hideout, realizing he can pull off 2 consecutive all-nighters. Despite being physically exhausted, seeing the finished exterior revives him. Now is the moment to solve how we'll use the electricity produced by the solar panels. In short, it requires several wiring steps to make sure the current works with his electronic devices. Luckily, it works fine once he plugs his phone in to charge. He lifts his arms in triumph, proclaiming he's laid the groundwork for survival in this new world. For the first time in ages, a surge of dopamine hits him. The day before, he also gathered luminous and ignition stones. While digging deeper, he unearthed a mineral called emeris, even harder and more razor-sharp than obsidian. Though it isn't useful right now, he still thinks it's better to have found something than to come up empty. He decides to postpone installing the LED lights, focusing instead on sorting the food supplies in the basement before heading to sleep. Suddenly, a loud noise from the Dingo grabs his attention. Sung-ho rushes outside and finds Dingo in a standoff with maned wolves, a monster species he knows from Sora. In the high-altitude regions, the hero notices Dingo's fierce anger and suspects these wolves are the ones who killed his mother. He realizes he can't take on the whole pack now. Moving to grab a better weapon would leave his back exposed to a potentially fatal attack. So he decides to force the alpha wolf to retreat, hoping the rest will follow suit. Watching their careful behavior, he notes that the subordinates only act after the alpha does. He considers their coordinated tactics and keen senses, and is relieved that Sung-ho is carrying pepper spray. He figures that if he can spray the alpha, he'll be able to drive it away from the shelter. Sweat drips down his face as he weighs the risk of being attacked before he can act. He carries out his plan, mulling over a way to distract the creature and land a hit with the spray. Suddenly, an idea flashes into his mind, one he thinks is logically sound. Determined to protect the hideout he built himself, he pulls a knife out and hurls it at the alpha. The creature sidesteps, and the alpha lunges at the hero. As it closes in, Sung-ho opens the portal, and he seizes the moment to spray the animal. With the alpha thrown off balance, the protagonist drives his knife into its eye, sending the wolf pack scattering. The hero settles in, breathing relief after a close brush with death. Dingo steps up, wary, and Sung-ho pats the wolf's head in thanks. He vows to one day avenge Dingo's mother. With that conflict behind them, only 15 days remain until the apocalypse strikes. After organizing the basement, Sung-ho heads to the hardware store at the pharmacy. With the aim of finalizing his minimal defense supplies, he has already logged 68 hours. He's been without sleep, and the recent clash with the wolves has only added to his exhaustion. Nonetheless, he thinks he might have been lucky during that encounter. If those creatures had been wolves instead, he would probably have been utterly wiped out. He ponders whether he had become careless, focusing only on immediate threats, without factoring in any random variables that might surface, feeling cornered again. Sung-ho mulls expanding his territory to build a proper shelter. His earlier drone surveys also point to this being the right course of action. Hyunjin waves from a distance, while Sung-ho stays deep in thought, weighing how the new plans could secure extra space for fields and supply storage. He decides that once the second line of defense is in place, he will turn to acquiring Bluetooth beacons to extend his signal range. Hyunjin's repeated calls pull Sung-ho back to reality, prompting him to ask what he's doing there. In a terse reply, Sung-ho says he's come to buy various supplies. Hyunjin jumps to the conclusion that Sung-ho wants weapons, a strange inference given there standing in front of a hardware store. He corrects himself, noting that the woman beside him is the one actually interested in weapons. She is introduced as a member of the team. After he finishes his purchases, Sung-ho learns that his friend has run into the woman and is now trying to dissuade her from buying weapons at the store, but she remains stubborn. Sung-ho decides to hand her the short summary note he'd prepared, hoping it will help. Yet even after reading it, she stays entirely skeptical. She fixes him with a cold stare that unsettles him enough for him to voice his discomfort. The woman then speaks, remembering that he runs the Teokbokki restaurant. Sung-ho confirms her guess. She looks visibly shocked by his new appearance and the shift in his demeanor. Thinking he's being rude, Sung-ho offers an apology, but she pulls a business card from her wallet and hands it to him. The young woman introduces herself as Jo Soo-yeon, intelligent, beautiful, and a doctor. After hearing her profession, Sung-ho explains the game's basics to her, just as he had for Hyun-jin and Mai Kyung. Yet she seems uninterested, claiming there's no scientific explanation for it. Sung-ho agrees it's merely a mindless pastime, but Soo-yeon isn't finished. She points out a specific detail that troubles her and immediately suggests that he must be an awakener himself. Sung-ho feels a twinge of discouragement at her sharp deduction, recognizing her exceptional intelligence. She concludes that his vivid explanations can't be. Hasn't played it. Still, Soo-yeon doesn't pursue the idea any further and simply thanks him for. In summary, Young Jun feels jealous that he couldn't explain things as effectively. The doctor jokes that Young Jun can't even match the depth of his knowledge. Sung-ho knows the game inside out. Grateful for his help, Soo-yeon becomes friends with him. Recognizing him as a good person, another attractive woman is effectively added to his life. Circle, the following day, the protagonist returns to his room, polishing the blade of his spear. The new weapon looks formidable, and he's eager to see how it fares in combat. Now that his initial setup is finished, he calls out to his dog Dingo and tells him that they're going to honor the wolf's mother. Although it isn't a pure act of retaliation, it would still be a serious problem would arise if an intruder discovered the hideout, so they must act swiftly to wipe out those perilous threats. In the next scene, the pair gear up for the kill. Dingo plays a pivotal part in this mission, currently confronting a pack of. There are wolves, yet oddly only 4 can be seen. What's most intriguing is that there's no alpha. A wolf is among the group. When Sung-ho takes a closer look, he realizes the true situation. An owl bear is ferociously ripping into a wolf's flesh, after having already slain several. Sung-ho thinks the creature's presence is handy, since it has effectively cleaned up a substantial number of foes. A distinctive trait of the manned wolf packs is that when, without their alpha, the pack disintegrates, their senses scatter, and confusion overwhelms them, leaving them totally uncoordinated. Sung-ho sees this as the perfect moment to take them down one by one. Just as if by design, a wolf lunges at him, yet Sung-ho casually sets a web trap and catches it effortlessly. The once ferocious beast shrinks to a trembling, whimpering creature, wailing in fear of death. Still, the protagonist remains unmoved, killing it instantly with his spear. Though the sight is pitiful, the mission must be secured. After one wolf fell, Sung-ho earned 3 points. The remaining 3 were drawn to his trail as he ran off, all going berserk and launching a chase. 2 darted to the sides while a third swooped in from above to strike, but Sung-ho countered with a spray. He disables one, yet 2 more close in from opposite angles. First, he turns to the wolf on his right, driving the spear deep into its belly. The last wolf tries to strike from the rear, but Dingo swoops in with a powerful tackle. With another wolf down, he earns 3 more points. Sung-ho menacingly declares he will stab each of them until they're dead, proving that he's the danger, not the one in peril. With the pack defeated, Seong-ho reaches. At level 5, he gains extra effects for his special trait. Curious about the changes, he checks the gate's properties. The new feature makes the gate invisible to everyone else. The projection also lets him hear sounds from the gate's target. To try it out, Sung-ho casts the gate right away and discovers he can see inside his house without actually stepping across. Transparency proves effective, guaranteeing that no one will be able to detect his ability moving forward. Earlier, Sung-ho had worried about accidentally entering a dungeon without knowing its threat level beforehand. However, thanks to the projection effect, that risk is now eliminated. The fact that this effect appeared at level 5 suggests that more rewards beckon as he climbs to higher levels, yet he had never imagined that the early stages would carry such significant benefits. Nonetheless, he still has a substantial amount of work to complete. It kicked off with burying the wolves he'd just slain. 2 days later, after subduing them, the protagonist checks off several tasks. First, he ventures into the other world and he launches another drone survey. Setting a 1-kilometer radius, he spots various harmless animals. Even today, no goblins or kobolds have been spotted. The area is entirely monster-free. Now, Sung-ho plans to gather intel on the goblin nest. It lies roughly 30 kilometers away, and that particular nest is said to be large enough to accommodate many. Hobgoblins, defeating them will be a tough challenge, but I've gained confidence. With the immediate safety of his location secured, Sung-ho feels it's the right moment to start expanding. He begins chopping down trees, clearing the space, and leveling the ground to transform the hideout. They work to establish a proper shelter base. Dingo emerges as the most valuable player, helping to form a large circular boundary. Sung-ho prioritizes safety, installing 2 full layers of barbed wire fencing next to a moat. He decides the moat needs to be 2 meters deeper to maximize its combined effect with the wire. While building these defenses, he uses the projected portal to watch television. The government has just announced plans to conduct a formal investigation into awakeners. In the real world, Sung-ho is always sourcing materials from hardware stores. He drops into several home renovation shops to pick up tool sets. On his way home, he even takes the chance to scout the rival group's hideout. Going even further, Sung-ho rents a motorcycle and a mini excavator, planning to use the heavy gear once he finishes additional training. The little blue toad keeps offering excellent support. Sung-ho consistently injects tiny doses of poison to build resistance, eventually amassing enough toxin to coat a weapon he chooses. Back in his room, he is stunned. He learns that Survivor 1, someone with 4,500 hours of playtime, has joined the mission, prompting Sung-ho to wonder about a link to the Wido shootout. Along with the government's suspicious media clampdown, the president has been confined to a single location. On the surface, these developments might simply appear coincidental. Sung-ho senses a far deeper link, and his original theory still holds. Survivor 1 is teaming up with the president to keep him safe, and he believes the partnership stems from Survivor 1's deep knowledge of the game's backstory. Because Survivor 1 is famous for collecting items, Sung-ho infers he likely asked the president for a huge shelter in return for that intelligence. And he seems to have chosen the president as a partner to secure the greatest possible leverage and authority. Sung-ho wonders whether it's all a grand bluff, yet my dream's involvement doesn't quite fit that picture. His rumination brings a headache, but he eventually comes to a verdict. If Survivor 1 and my dream are collaborating. Sung-ho also plans to tweak his personal strategy. In the next scene, Sung-ho sets up a new account and VR identity, but he worries about a delayed response, which could delay his plans, yet my dream replies almost instantly. Sung-ho assumes that he's probably out of work, yet he's focused on proving his authenticity through VR chat. The conversation begins. My dream steps into the white room. The 2 players face each other. My dream is especially. I was irritated by Sung-ho's mysterious alias, and the fact that he had to wear a ridiculous duck face. Avatar, Sung-ho gives a casual apology. My dream sees the disguise as a clue that he is handling a veteran who wants to hide his identity, while Sung-ho keeps him in the dark. My dream opts to test him with 3 pivotal questions. Only when they're answered will he recognize the stranger. Sung-ho immediately replies, 3 meters. He also correctly spots the owlbear's weakness, noting that it's light, a simple piece of knowledge. When Sung-ho discusses the zombie evolutionary stages, he notes that they don't merely spread infection, they actively consume real nutrients to survive. By accumulating these, they can evolve into ghouls, and intriguingly, some even become enhanced zombies before reaching that point. My dream then throws in a 4th question, despite his earlier promise of only 3. Sung-ho refuses to disclose the exact number of precursor events in the story. Hearing this, the other player laughs, admitting that Sung-ho is truly a veteran. The protagonist becomes visibly annoyed and demands that the other user contact Survivor 1 and have them join the call immediately. Yet he's told this is currently impossible. My dream gives no explanation for the refusal, so Sung-ho, who's sporting a duck face avatar right now, calls the excuse out as a lie. Shifting the topic, the other user behaves cryptically, tipping his hat and hinting that a major event is imminent. Sung-ho begins to suspect the man might be unstable, feeling as though he is merely reciting filler dialogue to buy time. A chill races down his spine as the reality of the situation hits him. My dream cuts off from the chat abruptly, and Sung-ho realizes that every part of the conversation was used to pinpoint his real-world location. Just then, a man burst into the internet cafe, flanked by 2 security guards, and commanded that the doors be locked. When the receptionist tries to enforce the rule that payment is required for her time, the intruder grabs her arm hard and declares that they're not here to play games. They're looking for a specific person. Sung-ho is uneasy about this aggressive stance because Dream was known for staying low profile and working undercover. It's odd that he'd choose such a confrontational tactic. Notably, the intruder wields a mind control-like ability that he uses to manipulate the receptionist. Seeing the danger, the protagonist knows he must flee at once. If he's captured, he'll likely undergo the same mind manipulation. He hurries to the bathroom and triggers his dimensional gate ability. Meanwhile, the pursuer moves through the cafe, indiscriminately using his mental powers on the patrons to uncover Sung-ho's identity. With every other area checked, he shifts his attention to the restroom. Supremely confident his target was hiding inside, he kicked open each stall door. The intruder wonders whether his target is a stealthy assassin, despite the potential. The awkwardness of cutting off an innocent bystander, yet my dream stays focused, confident in his ability to handle stealth-based opponents. To uncover any invisible presence, he splashes a bucket of water. He scans the room to expose uneven surfaces, flailing his hands through the air in hopes of making physical contact. The protagonist had indeed summoned his gate, but positioned it flat against the wall. Ironically, the pursuer stands directly in front of the portal, unable to see it because it is invisible. After inspecting, the intruder confesses that he was wrong about Sung-ho being a stealth user, which drives him to a second conclusion. The target is unmistakably a movement specialist. Looking like a low-cost copy of Nanami, he orders his team to sweep the whole area again, reminding them that a generous reward lies ahead once the target is seized. From the safety of his portal, Sung-ho watches the unfolding scene and muses on how things have taken this turn. He admits that, though he's wealthy in reality and stays humble in the game, he never wished the situation would get this far. He silently thanks my dream for bringing such clarity. Sung-ho had once felt conflicted, but now he's absolutely sure of his course of action. Choosing to come out of the shadows, he decides to fight unrestrained, no longer holding back when confronting violence with equal force. His opponent's towering stature makes him wonder where Sung-ho might be hiding. The man assumes Sung-ho is a movement-based fighter, aware that a seasoned veteran with so many hours of experience would be hard to track. Suddenly, the protagonist slips out from behind like a specter to greet him. My dream catches him in the mirror just as Sung-ho lunges forward with a spear. The poison tip cuts the man's leg, and he dies in seconds. The arrogant antagonist meets his downfall from a single slip-up. Without a moment to confirm the man's identity, Sung-ho slams his face into the wall, telling him not to turn. He then mocks the man for the pain the poison is now coursing through his veins. Whenever the man tries to speak, Sung-ho snaps him shut with a harsh command. Then, blade gripped firmly, he reminds him that neither the apocalypse nor the tutorial has officially begun. He also points out that the murderer system is essentially inactive. As he talks, he slices the belt that holds the man's gun. He adopts a chillingly grave tone. Sung-ho declares, in a brutal tone, that he would face no penalty if he killed him right then and there. The blade hovered against the man's neck, forcing him into obedient silence. Sung-ho is I was impressed that the man had finally learned to keep his mouth shut, and the opponent's body collapsed. He's still conscious, yet the poison has frozen him in place for now. Tsu begins. He kicked off the interrogation with his first question, probing why the man was trying to sell out the survivor, and was also targeting innocent people in the process. The man who had tried to hunt others is now reduced to a paralyzed victim, a pitiful monster that could be farmed without lifting a finger. In my dream, I cursed Seungho, who retorts by seizing the man's gun and saying that this is the cost he must bear for even daring to think of capturing him. Gripping his knife, Seungho issues a chilling threat, pledging to kill the man if they ever cross paths again. After the clash, Seungho leaves the cafe long before the rest of the group arrives. He arrives home unharmed and immediately crosses into the other dimension. There, he disassembles the gun and begins inspecting the man's identification card. The card reveals the name Kwan Kyung-jun. In his late 30s, he runs a golf club and manages 3 bunkers through his business. He also appears to be a wealthy patron to several women, securing both romantic partners and financial support. As for his abilities, Seungho assumes he possesses a powerful skill, judging from the countless hours he spent on the game. It's clear to Seungho that the skill involves mind control. All of this valuable information is now at Seungho's disposal. Sure, spending thousands of hours in a game doesn't automatically make you better. Even players who devote 10,000 hours to titles like Valorant or Counter-Strike can plateau and stay at the same skill level. Still, Seungho sees that survival has always been the game's top priority. Thus, he regards his portal skill as basically a cheat code for seasoned players. For the moment, he treats it as a hypothesis until he can verify it with another seasoned player. Then Seungho tests the gun, thinking about how the apocalypse is near. Firm in a single key detail, he follows Dingo's lead through the forest. At last, the dog's bark signals a spot of interest. There, dead police officers lie scattered beside a handful of goblins. Keeping his composure, the protagonist checks the state of the bodies. It turns out one officer is still alive. Although he has no fatal wounds, he is being affected by a paralysis poison. However, the most troubling detail is his missing weapon, though Seungho briefly ponders whether the officer had never carried one. Seungho gathers the bodies and tells the survivor to stay put for half an hour while the poison wears off. He then turns to the goblin corpses. At first glance, he sees several bullet holes, proving the police were indeed armed. The question that remains is, why is the gun gone? After reflecting on the situation, Seungho has a revelation, suspecting that this is the work. To find a gold goblin. The thought thrills him, and he's eager to hunt the creature himself. With a new plan set, the protagonist grabs his phone and dials emergency services. He also leaves a note that pinpoints the exact location and offers step-by-step directions to bury the goblin corpses. Seungho knows the public is already aware of the monsters. Stealth proves pointless. Right now, he's racing against time, hoping his small chance still holds. A lethal companion is ready to aid him. Elsewhere, a skirmish erupts between a goblin and an unawakened individual. The goblin deftly evades the man's swing and retreats, accompanied by 3 creatures. Yet the man questions his captain, asking whether this is truly the right way to handle it. In this situation, he expresses confusion over being forced to act as a tank when he has no abilities at all. Meanwhile, the captain taps into his psychokinetic skill to secure a tactical edge. The catch: the skill requires a significant amount of time to cast. The captain assembles a cluster of rocks and throws them to smash the goblin's body. While he assumes a support role, his companion asks when the rest of the party will arrive. The captain explains that the others had set out for Gaya Mountain but were apparently halted and could not climb. This news shocks the ordinary man who has no special abilities. The subordinate wants to retreat, but the captain urges them to press on. 3 goblins ambush the man, nearly crushing him, when rocks explode into their faces and snag their attention. Luckily, these goblins aren't as physically powerful as their in-game counterparts. The captain urges his companion to keep pushing forward while staying composed. He believes that if they can defeat the monsters and capture the hobgoblin group, they'll gain a significant advantage. But while the psychokinetic user is too busy lecturing his partner, he lowers his guard and a goblin's mace slams into him. With his hand wounded, he can't control his powers. Amazingly, a lowly goblin outsmarts him with a counter strategy, turning the fight into a hopeless scenario. With no cover left, the pair is encircled as the 3 goblins surge from all sides. It looks like the end for the amateurs, until a bolt suddenly pierces a goblin's head. A second and a third shot follow instantly, striking the remaining 2. Confused, the 2 have no idea what's happening. They stare into the dark forest, wondering where the arrows came from. The focus shifts to Tsingho gripping his combat bow. At first he wonders if he should have spent that ammo on an intervention. Yet he's glad he's uncovered crucial intel on the Awakeners. The group was stopped from climbing the mountain, and the goblins have already been significantly weakened. Armed with this knowledge, Tsingho crafts his next plan. He has already figured out a way to handle the goblin group. The approach is straightforward. It hinges on provoking a goblin, which can be done by. He throws a stone, spurring the creature's fury, and then plans to draw it toward a dimensional portal gate, activated by simple cues, opens once the goblin is close enough to approach. Tsingho intends to strike from the other dimension, exploiting the edge of its vision. Slip through the gate, remaining invisible to onlookers, when the first goblin was badly injured. Its screams will attract its allies' attention, leveraging the dimensional gate as a barrier. Tsingho will forcefully yank his spear from the goblin's body, erasing all physical damage. Proof of his attack, as for the goblin's reaction, renowned for its sharp perception. In the game, it will likely spot the dead subordinate and immediately suspect the other goblins of. Plotting against it will spark chaos and disharmony within the group, driving the subordinates too. Seizing the moment, the cunning Tsingho intends to emerge from the other side and deliver a decisive blow, keeping the advantage of a first strike. He plans to repeat the same tactic, and his scheme is progressing smoothly. His plan starts off smoothly, yet a snag arises when the remaining goblins display unpredictable behavior. To his surprise, Tsingho confronts an unexpected scene. The hobgoblin lunges at him while the gold goblin flees with the loot, hinting the 2 monsters have split. This bad news leaves the protagonist with no choice but to try a desperate gamble. The hobgoblin is his immediate threat, closing in with alarming speed. With no other options, Tsingho makes his best effort to block the powerful smash. He manages to block the direct hit, but the shock of the impact throws him into a nearby tree. Now trembling and wounded, his situation looks dire. The hobgoblin wastes no time trying to finish him off. Tsingho knows that if he falls here, death is certain. The creature swings its mace at full speed, aiming to crush his skull. At that critical moment, Tsingho's declining health activates his ultimate skill, survival instinct. With his eyes flashing yellow, he reacts to the hobgoblin's close-range strike. Instead of counter-attacking, he executes a clever move by darting after the fleeing gold goblin. Using the gun he got from Quan Kaiwang-jun, he lines up a shot at the creature's head and fires, instantly killing the gold goblin. Right after the kill, he opens the dimensional gate. Tsingho has finished the first phase of his farming mission, but the hideous monster is still on his trail. He pulls the firearm into the melee and opens fire on the creature. The hobgoblin cannot withstand the onslaught and is quickly overwhelmed. Tsingho responds with a stylish slash across its body. The monster screams as it dies, raising Tsingho to level 6 and giving him 16 points. Finally, his arduous quest is finished. He reviews his newly earned skill, Terrain Sense, which lets him detect and react to the surrounding landscape. Interestingly, in line with earlier events, the items he used or carried during the battle has been promoted to official system items. Realizing a search party is coming, he knows he cannot. He wasted no time. Having secured his target, he conjured the dimensional gate and stepped through. He intended to rest in his hideout until the search party departed. The next day, his dog roused him. He glanced at his watch and realized he'd slept an entire day because of the severity of his injuries hits him hard. Recognizing the dangers tied to the survival instinct, he resolves to use it only in dire circumstances. Before heading out on his next mission, he examines the loot he gathered. He pulled the loot out of the gold goblin stash and laid it on the table, several revolvers, a dagger, and a host of other curios, showing that the goblins were true hoarders. Although Dingo was pleased with the revolvers, he saw the mithril knife he'd seized as the real prize. This weapon boasts permanent invariance, a rarity in the game, making it one of the few armaments that remain untouched by the looming disease catastrophe. Still, Dingo wonders how a simple goblin could have gotten such a rare item, normally worth a hefty 100 points in the shop. He examines the blade closely and discovers it is actually defective and imperfect. While mulling it over, he comes to a realization. The goblins in this realm wield metal weapons. Given their intelligence, these creatures should be unable to produce these items on their own. This prompts the question of whether a sudden mutation shifted their civilization's course, hinting at the presence of even smarter goblins, perhaps researchers carrying out experiments. Yet he admits the theory currently has no basis. He'll test it later, but for now he's more drawn to opening the little satchels. Feeling as if he'd won the lottery, Dingo snags a handful of shade grapes. This unique fruit is said to boost night vision, explaining why the goblins could glide so effortlessly in the darkness. He pulls up the status window and checks his growth rate. He's very pleased with the results, noting that his progress is moving faster than it did in the game. With the basics wrapped up, Dingo decides it's time to head back to the real world. Activating his power, he steps through the portal, scrolling his phone. Once he regains a signal, his device begins to buzz non-stop. Yangjun, Mikyung, and even Sayang have all sent messages to see how he's doing. Feeling the spotlight on him, he wonders whether he's truly become popular. His first stop is the gym. In the next scene, Dingo opens the door to meet his friends. Before he can even say hello, they rush over, relieved to see that he's safe and sound. Curious, the protagonist asks about the unfamiliar faces around. Yangjun ushers them forward, announcing the new individuals as his party members. Lee Kyung-hoon and Kim Bo-ra politely greet him as they exchange pleasantries. Dingo had expected at least one more member, but it turns out this person is. He's busy buying camping gear at a discount store, and he's amazed to find out that the place does exist, prompting Mikyung to step in and confirm it's a very modern establishment. That just opened. Gym's director asks whether Dingo is up to date on the incident that's in the news. Dingo confirms he is, saying he's caught up through MeTube. A suggestion is made to set up a channel there as well. At the same time, the doctor who autopsied the Gaia Mountain goblin has gone into a panic, issuing a public warning urging everyone to brace for the looming apocalypse. During a national address, the president announced that the government is actively working to locate the game's creator. Yangjun asks about Dingo's next major objective. The entire party has gathered at this spot, drawn by Dingo's deep knowledge of the game. Yet Kyung-hoon is irritated by Yangjun's persistent inquiries, pointing out that he had already explained goblins' obvious yield points. He argues that if an awakener kills a monster, they would instantly jump from level 1 to level 2, so the primary goal should simply be to stockpile supplies. Dingo watches the man speak confidently, unaware of how wrong he is and the magnitude of the error. Addressing him directly, Tsingho says his claims are completely false. The arrogant man cuts him off, asking whether he has ever played the game and acting like a stubborn internet user who refuses to hear another view. To protect his identity, Tsingho insists he has not played, but that admission alone is enough for the man to dismiss him. Declaring that blind trust in the community is unwise, Bora, the other woman, turns to the man and asks a question. She's keen to learn how zombie spores work and probes whether there are any special conditions for the infection. The man reacts with a ludicrous claim that anyone who has ever touched an awakener will not turn into a zombie, a statement that sounds utterly bizarre. Slamming his hand on the table, Kai Young-hoon rises to assert his dominance, banking entirely on his awakener status. He asserts that even casual, non-awakened players would be affected. You automatically stay safe from the spores just by interacting with him, though that claim is unfounded, yet Bora is surprisingly convinced, clinging to him as if he were a genuine expert. Mai Kai-young cuts in with her own question, asking whether the man has managed to clear a tough lesson, and Kai Young-hoon steps in right away, assuring her he'll protect her. And insisting there's nothing to worry about. To Tsingho, he was a pretentious soul. Is becoming increasingly aggravating, while he gives Kai Young-hoon only minimal credit regarding. The theory, he realizes, provides no evidence that awakened people possess. She has full immunity to the spores, yet Jung-ho deems the whole conversation futile in light of their presence. He thinks about that single individual and finally grasps why Kai Young-jun had called him over, choosing to ignore it. Against the troll's antics, the protagonist musters the courage to leave, even as both of his friends urge him to stay. Jung-ho has no intention of sharing his knowledge with a troll like the man at the gym. He waves goodbye to the group, promising to see them again soon, and as he exits the fitness center. Club, he spots several spots to rack up points before the Iron Death disease strikes. He's especially keen to check out the camping gear, shop his friends recommended. After finishing his plans, he finally reaches his doorstep, only to see the elegant Soo-yeon has been waiting patiently to give him something. She pulls out a first aid kit, which actually holds a pack of painkillers and a variety of antibiotics that can't be bought without a prescription. Jung-ho is genuinely amazed by the special gift and the thoughtfulness of the gesture. The doctor then gives her address, already written down inside the pouch. Again, the protagonist wonders why she's going to such great lengths, but Soo-yeon thinks it's perfectly normal to share her address in return for knowing his. She bids him farewell and hurries to her appointment with the director. On the way, she suddenly recalls one last detail. Soo-yeon smiles and reminds him that he must pay for the medicine, implying that she gave her address for that very reason. Jung-ho is utterly confused, unable to read Soo-yeon's intentions or her behavior even a fraction of a clue. After their goodbye, the days slipped by in a rush. In those hours, the protagonist roamed the city, picking up a variety of items from different shops. He built a proper storage facility, installed sandwich panels, and was then ready to load his supplies inside. Meanwhile, he put the rented mini excavator to full use for the construction work. Soon, the world's situation grows ever more dire. Public chaos swells, political uncertainty mounts, disputes over truth intensify, and skeptics' debates erupt. These factors spark an emergency UN meeting about the US president's upcoming trip to Korea. Finally, the HSA uncovers something previously unimaginable. Amid the unfolding events, an asteroid bound to spark the zombie era is blazing its path toward Earth. 4 days later, Jung-ho arrives at Gamcheon Port and watches the stunning ocean view. This is where the final backstory event, the Russian ship incident, will unfold. After making sure the area is completely deserted, he slips into an abandoned building to finish his preparations. There, he opens the gate and explains why he's come here, even though the chance of turning into a zombie is high. His main goal is to recover a range of guns from the vessel. He realizes that zombie spores act as pathogens delivered by particle beams, making them almost unavoidable for anyone living without family and turning them into the undead. There's little difference between the present moment and 5 days from now. Shung-ho acknowledges that he could move permanently to the alternate dimension with Dingo, but it would strip him of his humanity. The existence of all meaning. With his preparations complete, he starts his mission, stressing that this is not a suicide-level gamble. Instead, he's taking a bold move that most would shy away from, embracing a high-risk path for greater rewards, seeing it as the essence of life. While reviewing the patch notes for that specific story arc, he assumes the 10-point. The weapon cited is an ebony club, yet he wonders how weak the zombies will be at this early stage. The notes also record point fluctuations after the asteroid impact, the sheer confidence, and incorporate details that convince him the game's creator was fully aware of these events. While scrolling through his phone, the situation quickly worsens. An emergency alert on the screen warns of a tsunami tied to the third precursor phenomenon. Soon after, the waves broke the shoreline, swelling higher with each surge. Far out at sea, a ship is violently tossed by the rough waters. Shung-ho sees the city submerged and must choose whether to fight monsters or confront the zombies. Watching the vessel, he ponders the despair humans feel when confronted by natural disasters. Yet he has to steer through the chaos and carry out his plan using his boat. Shung-ho, sprinting at full speed with his craft in hand, leaps straight off the building. Realizing time was tight, he had to finish his work before the government agents arrived. A short while later, he successfully anchored to the ship. All is progressing smoothly so far. He verifies that awakeners are immune to zombification, confirming that Kyung-hoon's theory was unexpectedly accurate. In fact, Shung-ho feels no adverse effects at all. Encouraged, he climbs the ladder to begin the second phase of his operation. Upon boarding, he spots zombies lurking on the deck and deliberately calls out to draw them in. Clad in shorts, a shield, and a mace, he resembles a Power Ranger. In the game, zombies had unique traits. They couldn't spread the virus to others, saw everything around them as prey, and grew stronger with each nutrient they consumed. Shung-ho charges directly at the zombies, crushing one with his shield. After tackling the first creature, he readies his mace and strikes the zombie's jaw, crushing its face and permanently altering its appearance. He's stunned at how quickly the two foes collapsed, wondering if the zombies have been seriously weakened compared to their game counterparts. He earns 2 points for the kills and remembers that before, a zombie required at least 2 hits to be taken down, while now a single strike will do. Yet, recalling the orc incident, he refuses to let his guard slip. He knows that repeating the same mistake twice would likely cost him. He risked his life. Next, Shung-ho checks the hallway and finds a cluster of trapped zombies. Noticing a few of them aimlessly wandering, he rushes forward, dispatching them left and right with ease. Seeking a pistol, he heads for the wheelhouse. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out, jolting him into shock. He can hardly believe anyone could. I survived the ship's infestation, sprinting toward the source of the noise. Shung-ho admits that even non-awakeners can sometimes be lucky enough to survive the spores through contact. Armed with the awakeners, his focus shifts to rescuing that man for further intel. When he arrives, the victim is already dead, gripping a photograph of a loved one. Though this hero never rises, his death benefits Shung-ho, who takes the man's gun. He lays the body flat for a proper rest before leaving the room. Shung-ho realizes he must grow accustomed to such scenes. Tragedy will only become routine. He accepts that in the end, he may need to kill more people to stay alive. While untying his boat's anchor, Shung-ho is surprised to spot a jet ski coming his way. It's clear another player has arrived to farm points, too. They cross paths, but he barely glances at the newcomer and focuses on loading his loot, heading toward the danger. Early the next morning, the news reports that a game developer has disappeared and is nowhere to be found for questioning. Since evidence of the zombies' existence emerged, the president has been taking relentless, decisive action. Shung-ho notes that the national leader thinks in a way very similar to his own. Reminding himself of one final task, the protagonist calls Lee Woobium, an administrator at the countermeasure headquarters. He drops the bomb, the exact moment the doomsday event will start. To prove who he is, Shung-ho reminds him of the gunshot wounds he left on the hobgoblin. Woobium is startled to realize he's talking to the same player. Shung-ho urges him to record the critical details quickly, exact date, exact hour, and a scenario about a package arriving that afternoon. Shung-ho hopes the countermeasures department will put the new intelligence to good use and wishes them luck in the impending war. The president has made a decisive maneuver. On community forums, folks are beginning to notice the situation is quickly worsening. Rumors are swirling that the internet and electricity won't last much longer, but Shung-ho approaches these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism. He still doubts whether all those predictions will actually come true, but an official announcement will be broadcast soon, guiding citizens to stockpile enough food and water for 4 days and to return to their families. The military launches active patrols, ordering the public to stop all activities. Immediately, a formal declaration is set to be issued by July 20th. Watching these developments, Shung-ho deems this the perfect response. He feels a pang of regret for not warning the public sooner about the world's impending fate, and he reflects. If he'd known the government could handle the situation this competently, he would have. He made the most of his trait from the start, though it appears to be a significant. After a mischance, Shung-ho copes by admitting he probably couldn't have stopped the disaster. Regardless, he decides there's no use in mulling over what might have happened and chooses to focus instead. He honors his promise, affirming he isn't a hero of justice, nor does he aspire to be. He's just an ordinary man. After that, lockdowns and quarantines were put into place. Upsets the global status quo, making travel impossible. Consequently, Shung-ho spends his days. In the alternate dimension, he wraps up his slow dig just 3 days before the apocalypse. He also downloads and archives many cooking and farming videos, preparing for the imminent loss of internet access. Just 2 days before the apocalypse, he and Dingo scour the nearby landscape and feel lucky to find several golden apples. The find makes him speculate whether the whole area is enchanted or somehow blessed with extraordinary fertility. Shung-ho notices that 2 packs of sweet potato jellies are gone from his storage, replaced by a single dried grape. He instantly suspects Dingo ate the jellies, but the honest dog shakes his head, denying any involvement. Shung-ho uses a teasing, forceful tone to coax the truth, yet the poor creature wails and cries, desperate to prove his innocence. Shung-ho ultimately realizes his small companion wasn't the culprit, hinting that someone else is to blame. He decides to watch the CCTV footage to see what really happened. When he pulls it up on his laptop, Shung-ho is stunned to discover a swarm of beetles crashing through the doggy door. They had taken the jelly and left the grape behind as a form of payment, a place that was undeniably cute. The beetle actually turns to bow in gratitude toward the camera, showing that these small creatures are surprisingly intelligent. Shung-ho's curiosity peaks, and he develops a strong desire to interact with a few of them. Yet, as a safety measure, he locks the pet door, a move that visibly saddens Dingo. With guests arriving soon, he can't stay any longer in the other world, so he opens the dimensional portal and returns. In the next scene, Shung-ho sits with his friends and core party members, marveling that everyone has arrived safely despite the strict lockdown. He spots an unfamiliar face, only to learn that the new man is the final addition to the team. This handsome individual turns out to be Yoo Hyun, already an awakener. Despite his limited game knowledge, he's an electrical engineering student with plenty of hands-on experience. S. Jung-ho welcomes the new addition to the group and calls himself a non-awakener. S. Jung-ho welcomes the new addition to the group and identifies himself as a non-awakener. They begin with a polite exchange, and S. Jung-ho intends to deal with the pressing matters quickly. He asks everyone to share their insights one at a time, starting with Yongjun. Yongjun begins by recalling an episode with his ex-wife when their phone line was suddenly severed mid-conversation. Alarmed, he set out to find their daughter, but on the way back he saw barricades coming down on the highway. As he dug deeper, Yongjun learned that officials were trying to evacuate residents living close to the petrochemical complex. Soo-yeon saw a shelter taking shape in the local park, a startling yet confirmed reality. Mai Ki-young follows, saying that while she was at the market, she heard rumors that senior officials had been opposing the president's moves. She reports that every one of those dissenters was subsequently detained. S. Jung-ho sees that these findings are far more valuable than he had first imagined. The finish is near, and the president's position is unmistakable. He clearly knows what's about to happen. The real question is why S. Jung-ho asked for each of their input individually. This strategy was chosen because, in a network, it's vital to build matching logic from the information others share. While he could simply reveal himself as a veteran to win them over, doing so would put him at significant personal risk. S. Jung-ho starts speaking, urging everyone to listen closely to his next words. He then boldly declares that the president's true aim is to engineer a controlled apocalypse. The room goes silent in shock. S. Jung-ho backs his claim with the unexplained lockdowns and the sudden shutdown of all national facilities. He argues that there is only one reason the government would enact such drastic changes so quickly. Piecing everything together, he realizes the end is imminent. Soo-hyun immediately grasps the situation, deducing that the government must already know the exact day the apocalypse will strike. S. Jung-ho confirms this suspicion, pinpointing July 20 as the likely date. In a panic, Hyun rushes to tell his family. But the protagonist yells at him to stop, and he is resolved to prevent the group from losing. Composure. Even though it might sound cruel, he stresses that individual survival takes priority over. Family worries loom over this situation. S. Jung-ho sharpens everyone's attention, reminding the room that any one of them could turn into a zombie tomorrow, hinting that death's terror is looming. Overall, he tackles the core issue by assembling a stack of files and acknowledging he gathered them there for a reason, and it's clear now. He has a strategy for the tutorial phase, along with comprehensive insights into the survival aspects of what's ahead. When Hyun Jin asks where this intelligence came from, S. Jung-ho says he obtained it by. While watching the streams, he apologizes to Mik-young for the lie he told earlier, but she accepts it without complaint. She pointed out that she'd treated him the same way. Thanks to those files, the group can now make use of the information tailored to each individual's needs. At the same time, S. Jung-ho urges them to follow the manual closely to guarantee they succeed in the tutorial. It arrives. This is the final day of calm before the world spirals into hell. For 32 straight days, S. Jung-ho has trained, leveling up in every domain to boost his chances. He notices flaws in his plan and fears that remaining anonymous could eventually cause his downfall. Despite the doubts, the valiant youth remains without regret, having acted with confidence. S. Jung-ho watches as his country fires missiles at the looming asteroid, striking it successfully. He wonders whether the apocalypse truly is humanity's inevitable end. The apocalypse officially begins as morning arrives, bringing with it the lifting of the lockdowns. S. Jung-ho has finished all its prep work, from installing bulletproof glass to fitting high-strength, durable doors. He then follows his usual routine, injecting a small dose of poison to hone his resistance. Afterward, he powers through a workout, crushing 301 push-ups even while the toxin coursing through his veins, displaying a work ethic that could outshine even the strongest fictional heroes. Jung-ho slips into his combat gear, looking impressive, before sharing breakfast with his dog. He waits for the 9 a.m. announcement, briefly nodding off in the meantime. Suddenly, the hour arrives and the television flickers to life. The president addresses the nation, delivering a sweeping announcement. Martial law is declared and roads will be closed, along with other measures. Jung-ho is moved and impressed by the president's decisions, convinced that no other leader could have guided the country to a more dignified conclusion. Seeing the leader's bleak condition, he grips the remote and struggles to accept the final outcome. Still, he knows this fate cannot be avoided. Humanity's survival is a hard truth. But this time, Jung-ho will not face the apocalypse as a novice. He's a seasoned veteran, armed with deep knowledge. Only 4 hours remain before the spores are slated to make contact. He spends 2 of them in the alternate dimension, inspecting the items he's farmed and stored in his warehouse. Back in the real world, he sets up the essential equipment to manage the days after the Iron Death disease begins. While he's immersed in the other world, humanity begins to collapse, and chaos runs rampant among civilians. They clashed and harmed each other, while a general apathy toward order took hold. In one case, a hefty man drifts through the streets, shamelessly exposing himself as if resigned to death before being. They were struck by a car and killed. Some individuals seem to relish killing others without remorse, confirming that the world is truly coming to an end. The blonde driver shows no remorse over the pedestrian he just killed. His friend says it's fine to get rid of the car, arguing that an impending Iron Death disease will soon wipe out all vehicles. Another man points his bat at the rooftop, calling out the silent spy watching them. He carries a personal grudge against the protagonist and aims to kill Seung-ho for a quick points boost. Confused by the man's arrogant air, Seung-ho's attention is pulled to flyers tumbling down from the sky. Even as the world teeters on the brink of collapse, the government still cares for its citizens. Seung-ho marvels at this selflessness, contrasting it with his own brutal self-preservation. He thinks that if more people worked for others' benefit, tackling the apocalypse would be far simpler. He crumples the paper in his hand, realizing the expectation is unrealistic. Determined, he sets his focus solely on getting back to his preparations. In the next scene, with barely 3 minutes left before the spores make contact, Seung-ho has gathered a stack of air tanks and wonders if the quantity will hold up before the disease fully takes over. He has memorized every resupply route in the city. Glancing at his watch, he briefly considers the risk of forgetting to remove it, only to dismiss the thought as over-worrying. Keeping things simple, he slips on his helmet. At 9 p.m., the clock ticks and the spores finally touch the world. Overwhelmed, Seung-ho fires up his motorcycle, hoping his plan will go off without a hitch. The narrative then turns to the infection's onset, as the spores begin to spread through the general population. Vitality is drained from the victims, leaving only flesh-eating corpses. Those growling, purplish monsters are instantly drawn to specific sounds. Seung-ho darts past a handful of zombies, relieved to see the area isn't swarmed by them. It turns out most of the infected have stayed indoors, which is a small mercy. Dying alongside their families, the only thing that intrigues him is the prospect of looking for a survivor who hasn't been turned. Nevertheless, the situation looks manageable. Spotting a clear path, he cuts a shortcut, prioritizing zombie avoidance while he moves through quickly. Concentrating on gathering supplies, I found that the shop shutters were still firmly latched. This lets him easily break the glass with his sledgehammer, a task he promptly carries out before. Entering, Seung-ho summons the portal, knowing speed is crucial, and surveys the items he needs. knowing it will take a while for the spores to fully take over the mind. The zombies. His best move is to storm the hardware store before they can coordinate. He strikes, thereby sidestepping needless conflict. Thus, he hurls everything within reach. Through the portal, he flooded his dog's area with an enormous dose of medicine. After the pharmacy is completely emptied, Seung-ho evaluates his progress and realizes he is moving forward. Progress is faster than expected, yet his assumption crumbles when he reaches the hardware shop and finds double layers of security. He'd anticipated this hurdle, which is why he brought the tanks. Seung-ho fires the oxygen cutter's focused heat. A minor problem pops up. The equipment is too loud, drawing nearby zombies. Scanning his surroundings, Seung-ho recalled that even though their tracking senses had been dulled in the game, they still only needed a few moments to locate a sound source. A whole horde surrounds him, underscoring his potential.